Welcome to the Ways to Wellness podcast. This is episode 1. I am your host, Francesca Scerbo, and we are here to talk about the basics of nutrition. So Nutrition 101. We are going to be here to answer all of your questions and things that you have that maybe you're just unsure about. So we're going to take the complicated and make it uncomplicated.
Basics.
Basics, baby.
I guess we could start off, most people, if they're going on a nutrition plan or a diet, or if they've dieted before, first thing most people look at or should look at is calories. Mm-hmm. What are calories?
What are calories? Yeah, that's an interesting one for sure. I mean, calories are energy, right? So I think that people are really confused that calories is just this basic number. But what is that number consist of? Does it consist of the good calories or the bad calories, which breaks down into your macros and your micros, right? Fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, and then all of the nutrients that go with that.
And I think too, a lot of times with calories, people, if they're prone to look at calories only, not all calories are created equal. Calories are a unit of energy. Mm-hmm. Basically, food that you eat provides calories, which is energy for our system, or the gas or the fuel that our body needs to function, breathe, just do what we do on the day to day. But then the types of calories are where we hopefully will help you make some better choices, smarter choices, so you could fuel your body the best way possible.
Absolutely. I get that question all the time with Nutrition 101. What should I eat? Right? Like, what should I eat? Well, that's a very loaded question, but what you should eat is eating real food, real wholesome foods that you can find in farmers markets or not in a box in a supermarket. And again, what is the purpose of our nutrition? Kind of what you just said. Are we doing it for competition purposes? Are we doing it for long-term health and longevity? Are we doing it for weight loss? Are we doing it for, anti-inflammatory purposes, gut health? So knowing what those foods should be and what nutrition should be for each individual is going to be really important.
Yeah. And I'd like to say, like, a lot of times when you look at calories, and she just hit on it, trying to get smarter caloric choices, mm-hmm. more nutrient dense choices, things that are going to provide more than just calories to your system, because you'd have 100 calories from like a crap bar, or you could have, 100 calories from avocado. And you might look at like, well, this bar has less calories, so it's better for me. But unfortunately, sometimes going with the lower calorie choice is not always the best choice. Mm-hmm. Making sure that it's, going with whole foods, you're going to have a lot more nutrient density, density. Course, I can't even say it. Things that are going to provide more than just calories or energy for your system.
Absolutely. And the real food actually has the better source of calories. I think we kind of get into the added calories when we take those food sources. Like if we take a steak and we douse it in butter and cream, that's going to make that calorie for the steak obviously higher. If we take some basic broccoli and we deep fry it, right, in seed oil and something like that, and then we put it with cheese that's processed. So I think that, and that's obviously higher in calories. Yep. So I think it's understanding like how to pair the foods and what we're eating and how we're eating it to really understand like not all calories are created equal.
Yep. And then two, while we're on the topic of calories, calories, if you consume more calories or energy than your body expends, that's typically weight gain.
For sure.
And being in a calorie deficit or consuming less than what you actually do physically through your day typically leads to weight loss. But, I would say that's like a slippery slope, because a lot of people just want to cut calories. And unfortunately, if you cut too much or cut them too low, or the quality of the calories the overall end outcome will look completely different. Mm-hmm. Not to mention the process, if you are, because most people in the world we live are trying to be a little bit more in shape or be a little bit more fit or just a little bit leaner. So, making sure those caloric choices are going to be more than just calories. And when we talk about setting deficits, making sure you have a healthy deficit, so you're not losing the good stuff. Unfortunately, people want weight loss, but we want composition loss. We want fat loss.
All right. Absolutely. And you just said what I was thinking is the problem is everyone that's trying to lose weight is actually cutting too many calories. And when we cut too many calories, like you said, for what it is that you want, if you want lean muscle, or if you want, to drop that weight, and improve, your overall body fat composition, yeah, you really want to make sure that if you do too much too fast, your body's going to think it's in a fight or flight. So it's going to hold on to all of those calories that you have, and it's obviously not going to let it go. I'm also a really big fan, and I'm not sure how you feel about it, but I also feel like if you're eating more nutrients, like obviously a person cannot eat, 3,000 calories worth of broccoli, but they can easily eat 3,000 calories worth of potato chips.
Yep.
So where's the balance? So I like to go, when I do something like that with my clients, is really try to give them as much nutrients as possible, because that nutrients with the fiber and the water soluble content is actually going to make somebody feel fuller faster. So you are actually then eating lesser amounts of calories because you just can't consume much more.
Yep. Fuller, faster, and fuller, longer.
Yeah. Yes.
So,
yes.
I feel like the non-nutrient dense foods that people pick, or the processed foods, or the things with a long laundry list of ingredients, tend to make us hungrier, quicker. And then you tend to consume more calories or you just suffer.
Absolutely. And then when we're reading labels, you talked about labels for sure. If you read the front of a label, and the front of a label is saying it's low fat or low sugar or low carb or heart healthy, it's kind of sort of not. Let's really be honest. They're just putting that in there to get you to eat it. So, and then you will eat that. And then what happens? Again, I love to use the analogy of the bowl of sugar, or the bowl of sugar is really the bowl of cereal in the morning, which is a bowl of sugar. That bowl of cereal in the morning. Now, are there some healthier options to cereal? There's some stuff that I actually like, that I do use with clients, that is not really, I wouldn't even call it a cereal, but I would call it there's like a crunch factor. There's something, I think it's called 7 Sundays is an example of that. But anyway, I think that, reading those labels and understanding that that's not the right form of nutrients. I'd rather have somebody for breakfast eat the egg, or eat, a piece of have avocado with some smoked salmon, maybe something like that. Pick and choose where that source is coming from.
Absolutely. I think while we're on the topic, let's kind of work it from the top down.
Yeah.
So we're talking calories, which is units of energy, but the next thing in line when you're looking, because I think a lot of people get confused with food labels and what's on a food label, one, knowing the serving per the calories that are there.
Right.
And then the subset of those calories are macronutrients, which a lot of people have heard: protein, carbohydrates, fat. And then you could get into we'll talk about each one in particular. But don't use calories as your end all be all. It's a good gauge to where you're at if you understand what does your body need, or how many calories you might need to be able to function on the day-to-day, whether you're trying to lose or gain. But going a step further now, what are the macronutrients, and then we'll talk after that micronutrients, when that's going to come down to if it's processed or not processed, more whole foods. So,
the source.
Of your calories, you have protein, carbs, and fat.
Right.
What do you want to talk about first, protein, carbs, or fat?
Let's talk about fat. Because I think that when people do read those labels, to what you just said, if they see that something has 12 grams of fat, they're going to put that sucker down.
Yep.
And let's find out, where is that fat source coming from, which goes into the ingredients, which we just talked about. What's the label say? But yeah, let's talk about fat, because I feel like fat is scary. And it's one of those things that with my clients, people will shy away from that. And it's actually really important to get those healthy fats in, and then understanding where those, what are some of the healthy fats that people could eat?
I mean, when you get into whole food, nutrient dense, avocado, nuts, seeds,
healthy
eggs,
oils. Yep.
Certain types of dietary fats that come from dairy, not to mention those have a lot of other, micronutrients like your A, D, E, and K with that. But every gram of fat, and I think what you were saying, people get kind of demonize fat because they look at it, and if it has 10 grams of fat, for every gram of fat, you have 9 calories. And so, something so small could have 90 calories, but that 90 calories, if it's a good quality fat, can make you feel full. It's going to provide a lot of other nutrients for you. Our brains think off fat. Well, obviously our brain's a good chunk of that. So, picking your fat choices wisely, and don't always shy away because the calories, just because they are more dense, they do have more calories per gram. It's just the types of fats that you choose.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, look, if you're going to pick an avocado, great. If you're going to pick the fat from, a piece of chocolate, not so great. So it goes back to the sources. And again, where, like, what is the purpose of that calorie source? Like you just said, fat is good for brain function. It's good for your certain cholesterol levels. Certain fats, like we'll use the avocado. Cause for me, I feel like that's like the scariest one for people. I can't have that. It's too fattening. No, it's not. It's okay. Again, we still have to worry about portion control, but again, like that has a great source of fiber. I personally eat like a half an avocado, maybe one, depending on my day, a day. And I think it's great. It also has other benefits. It's good. Healthy fats are good for hair, nails, and skin, right? So for us women, who doesn't want that? Like, of course we do.
Be able to absorb certain fat soluble vitamins,
right?
Like we talked about, vitamin A, D, E, and K. Some of that's crucial. I think a lot of people too, they get focused on a dietary type of plan or a ketogenic diet or a Mediterranean diet. And listen, they all have their pros and cons. But they tend to exclude one macronutrient, whether it be excluding protein. If they're on a diet plan, most diet plans are going to have a decent amount of protein if it's a well-known diet plan, because it's going to definitely do well with supporting muscle. But, I think a lot of people try to exclude one macronutrient, and you honestly need them all.
Absolutely. And what I find when you do exclude that, the one I see the most is, since we, with fat is, you were talking about the energy source for sure. But having that healthy fat definitely keeps the satiation higher, right? So we're less likely to look for something else. And as we dive into some of the other macros, maybe this will be a good tie-in to maybe switch into like a carbohydrate. If someone is really lacking that carbohydrate, they're craving a lot. They're craving sugar. They're craving the sweets. And I see that they'll have a great dinner of like a protein and some great vegetable of sorts. And then they get off the dinner table and they're like, I need something sweet. Well, we need to probably put some type of a non-resistant starch into your program so that you're not going to be looking for something later on. And there are a lot of great sources for that, like a sweet potato, cauliflower rice. Remember, like people think that vegetables don't have carbs. They do, and they're actually the better forms, as opposed to having a bowl of pasta or having, a lot of like white rice. Now, I'm not against those things, but having too much of those things, not so much. So there's a lot of good alternatives. And once we sneak some of those things in there, you've got the good carbs, you got the fiber, and they're less likely to have cravings.
They feel a lot more satiated, a lot more stable blood sugar.
Right.
Before we jump off that and we go deep into carbohydrates, I think too, helping people understand, you have fat and you have types of fat. You have saturated fats, right? Which are basically kind of circulate in the system longer. You have unsaturated fats, polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, which are considered generally the healthier fats to help support cholesterol, blood lipids.
Right.
You could get into polyunsaturated, which is more multiple kind of, you got mono and poly. Mono's one. And then you have poly, which is multiple ways. You could get into, healthier fats like omegas, which are partly EPA and DHA. You could get into like we were talking about with like just more the healthy unsaturated fats are going to improve your cholesterol, are going to improve how you think, how you function. Whereas going more with saturated fats, those are the ones that typically you want to shy away from a little bit more than the polyunsaturated or monounsaturated.
Well, and unfortunately, there's not a lot of information on food labels of those things. So one of the things that I think we could maybe just give an example of what are some of your top like polyunsaturated fat foods maybe?
Like oily fish is going to be a great one.
Exactly.
You could get into, even from some certain dairy products, eggs, you're going to have you'll have some saturated as well, which, depending on the source, if it's whole food, I'm okay with some saturated fat because we need some. There's a lot of studies showing like the quality of that fat or the type of that fat will make a difference in blood lipids. So I don't want to completely demonize saturated fats. A lot of animal meats are going to have saturated fats in them.
Yes.
You could obviously cut some of if you're not cardiovascularly in a good spot, you could probably cut back on some of the fattier forms of animal protein and try to switch to more unsaturated forms to improve your blood lipids.
For sure. But when we read the labels, we see saturated fats and your trans fats for sure. So if you've got issues with cholesterol, even like blood pressure, whatever it may be, if your health numbers are not where they need to be, let's maybe start to dial down on some of those and get the sources that you just mentioned, the real food sources, into your plan, because otherwise, you're going to go down like a health road that you don't want to, for sure. And, obviously you did mention the fish oils. So someone can supplement maybe with a little bit of omega-3 fish oils with the, instead of just, if they can't get everything at one time, for sure.
Well, and that's one of EPA and DHA. It's hard to get from your diet.
I personally use it. I mean, I love them and I love salmon and avocado and all that kind of stuff myself. But, I just find that, even for, as a 45-year-old woman going through hormone stuff, like we need to have that healthy fat in our bodies. It's super important. Especially
for just hormone health and balance. Even when you can get into like vitamin D, which is fat soluble.
Right.
Kind of let's segue then from, all right, we talked about fats, we talked about saturated fats, unsaturated fats, sticking with more healthier fat choices, the seeds and the nuts and the avocado. Don't be afraid of them, especially it's a part of your diet, in the grand scheme, and it all depends on your goal. If you're trying to lose body fat or gain muscle, you would adjust your calories accordingly, your macronutrients accordingly. I feel like a lot of people want to demonize fat, but then they eat simple sugars, and they're having like too many simple sugars or too many refined sugars, which has been proven to feed more inflammation and potential plaque deposition than healthy fats. So, let's talk a little bit about carbohydrates, what they are, sources of them, obviously better sources, and why you should have some in your diet to survive.
Absolutely. Well, let's, you want to talk about the energy sources of the carbohydrates.
Yep.
So what is that? It's like 4 calories for the carbohydrates. So it's obviously less than the fat. But I think a big part of the carbohydrates is, I feel like that's the theme of the day, is what's the source? Yep. And it's tough because carbohydrates are a big part of breakfast, right? So if you're trying to lose a little bit of weight, or you're trying to clean up maybe your GI system, and you're trying to cut a little bit of those inflammatory foods, carbohydrates are a big one. Again, are they coming from cereals? Are they coming from the boxed pancakes, the bagels, certain breads, right? Are they coming from, you got the waffles, you've got the croissants, there's all of that stuff. And that's like a high amount of breakfast food. So it's really difficult to navigate. So I always try to say there are, try to pick different sources of a carbohydrate, maybe like sprouted things, such as like my go-to has always been Ezekiel bread. I feel like I say that all the time, but there's a different one out there. But I know for a fact, for someone that has a gluten situation, that's the best bread for me.
Yeah. Well, and I agree with you 100% on that. A lot of people, if they're grain sprouted and they do have some type of gluten sensitivity or gluten tolerance, they usually tend to do pretty well with that. But, going back to like calories are important. And once again, the poison's in the portion with all the macronutrients. But you got to remember, like our body, our primary source of energy is carbohydrates. Exactly. That's what our body uses first. And so that's kind of like, our first line of energy. If we don't have it over time, our body could kind of compensate and start using your fat to get ketones, but it's not really the main source of energy, the main primary source of energy that we use to function, especially if you're doing more physical activity. Right. So I think like excluding any one macronutrient completely from your diet is not bright.
No.
Unless you're just trying to, I always hate to say it, people are always like, I'm getting ready for a wedding, so I'm going to cut my carbs, or I'm getting ready for, my high school reunion. Yeah. There's ways to cut, but even with glycogen or with carbohydrates, if I cut your carbs, you're going to mostly lose water weight.
Absolutely.
And that's why I think people get so drawn into demonized carbohydrates, because they see that initial drop, they feel less bloated, they see a couple pounds drop on the scale. And then, depending on how your diet is set up, if they're not having much good fats and they're not having much carbohydrates, they feel like crap. Mm-hmm. They just can't really get by in their day to day.
I think when it comes to a lot of these macros is pairing them with each other, right? Yep. So if you have someone that's just going to eat a bowl of oatmeal and then come and work out, that oatmeal source is going to go, right, really fast. But if you pair the oatmeal with, say, some type of a healthier, you pair it with maybe say like some type of an almond butter, or you pair that with some type of a like protein powder, or you do it with
or
flax
egg.
and chia. Yeah. Or you put it with an egg. Or if you do it with like flax, chia, hemp seeds, something like that, that's great because that'll actually keep you fuller. But that's where I think we're kind of going like, what is the, eating one food source alone isn't right, but taking it out altogether isn't right. So if you could pair them and get the benefit from every little piece, then you actually I think you have a better source of a meal and a source of energy.
A lot more complete in your diet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going into, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about this, like thermic effective food. And this goes back to like why you choose whole food versus processed food. If you eat fat, you basically, thermic effective food is basically how much gets used to digest that type of food. Fat, typically 2 to 3% through digestion. Carbohydrates are more close to that 5 to 10. And then protein, this kind of like, I love to put this out there because this is kind of, I try to really push a lot of clients to prioritize protein, is protein 25 to 30%, just to break it down. For example, if I eat 100 calories from a protein source, I'm going to get probably 75 of those calories, right? But what it does, it shows you it's harder for your system to break it down. And then when you couple it with a carb or you couple it with a fat, you tend to have a better window to utilize what you just consumed. And so you're not really going to be neglecting any one food group. You're not sitting there, eradicating certain macro or micronutrients that come. I think a lot of people will go on, like, if you want to demonize carnivore and they eat protein, but then they don't have the phytonutrients that come in from that. Or if they're going more ketogenic, they'll exclude carbohydrates completely across the board, but you'll add a fat source in, but then the fat source sucks. It could create other problems. So, really trying to, one, make smarter choices, try to stick with more whole foods, and then try to make sure, obviously, depending on your goal calorically, it falls within line with what you're trying to do. And then sequencing around your day to kind of support what you're doing. Yeah. And that's typically with carbohydrates. It's good to be able to either have them before, during, or after your training to support, the damage that you cause, so you could kind of replenish and repair a little bit faster, but coupling it with something so you have a better window to use it.
Yeah. I typically like to have my clients, in addition to pairing, I like for most of the carbohydrate sources to be done like before dinner.
Yep.
Because you're moving all day, and it's not just movement, but our brain function is high during the day. I mean, like, unless you're someone that just can't shut off your brain, then you're still moving later in the evening. But different use of it during the day. You're constantly going. You're on the move. During the evening time, I'll kind of maybe pull back on something like that because I think that you don't really need it as much. And kind of to fall back into like on your protein, I think protein is super important. I think what's been going on now as far as protein goes, and this probably would be part of what we're talking about, is we're trying to over protein, if that makes any sense. I don't think a lot of people understand, like, so what's the right amount of protein for me? I know personally for myself, I can only take in like, maybe 100 grams, 110 grams a day, because I start to not feel so good. There's just too much. I'm not breaking it down. I think that we try to, I think we just become a society where more is better, where it's not like, what's the quality? What's, what are we using it for? So, and I think we've got to like kind of slowly introduce that into somebody's plan. And then again, what are the sources? If it's red meat, if it's chicken, if it's fish, if it's eggs, if you're plant-based, if it's tofu, whatever it may be. I think that slowly getting that into your digestive system will cause less digestive stress. And then I think it would lead to, to better results. So I think that that's my take with the carbs later in the day. And then protein, maybe kind of like easing into how much we do all at one time.
Yeah, no, and you kind of hit it on the head, like, per your weight, per your goal, 0.8 to 1 gram per pound is usually, and I always say per pound of lean muscle tissue, which would probably put you spot on with that. And then you learn to kind of backfill the macronutrients, whether it be the carbohydrates, you're putting them earlier in the day to put some gas in your tank. I like to use carbohydrates like gas for your car. You need them to be able to drive. If not, you're just going to be running on fumes. And then, you might, when you start cutting back some of the carbohydrates, you might feel the difference with some good healthy fats or quality fats, and just try to build a well-rounded nutrition plan so you're not really lacking in any one area. You could lose weight on carbs. You could lose weight on fat.
Absolutely.
It's just the poison's in the portion.
Absolutely. It's in the portion. It's in the source.
Yep.
For sure.
Yep.
I mean, absolutely. So yeah, I 100% agree with that.
So a lot of times, protein, we kind of already hit on it, there's so many benefits to adding protein, no matter your choice. Obviously, if you're vegan, vegetarian, there's ways to still get protein in, but have enough protein to support lean muscle. Protein is going to make you feel fuller longer. It's going to slow digestion down a little bit. And so I always kind of say that's like a really good stable. You don't need to do 200 grams or 300 grams in your day to get results. I think a lot of that's happened because over the years, people follow certain types of dietary plans and they exclude the other macronutrients, and how are they going to make up the difference? Or it's not even so much making up the calories to support what they're doing, but it's they figure like, well, I could eat more of this or have a lot more of it. So they're not really kind of honing in their portion control per sitting, but you can still get fat off protein. It's much harder, right? Per how the body works with it. But, I mean, I think that's a hard one for most people to overdo, but it shouldn't be about how much food can I eat. It's like, how can I eat to fuel my system the best way possible so I could be my best?
Yeah. And I think that's got to correlate with obviously a plan. And that goes back to the different, I hate to call them weight loss programs, but the different types of diets. So, obviously you've got carnivore, you've got Mediterranean, you've got keto, you've got, there's like, it's just plant-based. I mean, there's some of them where it's just like, I just gonna eat soup. I mean, we could probably come up with one ourselves.
So many.
There's so many of them, but I think that there's a little bit, you need to have a little bit of each part of it, but then understand the why.
Well, I think that's the goal of today, is to really just drive home that, calories are a part of it. The types of food are a part of it, and it just helping someone formulate a plan that's going to be kind of well-rounded across the board. So they're not kind of neglecting any one thing and creating a bigger problem from neglecting a macronutrient or a micronutrient.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, I agree 100%.
So we talked about calories, we talked about protein, carbs, fat. Let's talk about micronutrients.
Okay.
So, as far as, I know your go a lot of times with your clients and forever since you've been in the space is, try to stick to more whole foods, less processed foods. A lot of times whole foods, you are going to get a better, more dense nutrient profile to support just all systems of the body.
Right.
So what do you want to add on like the micronutrient side? I mean, there are certain vitamins that you have to supplement, outside of your diet. I always say try to get it from your diet, but there's going to be things that sometimes we still need to supplement.
So I'll give my supplements maybe. So I think my important ones are obviously, we want to get good B vitamins. Your B vitamins are obviously going to come from your greens, but not a lot of, unless my nickname is like a rabbit because I eat so much greens. It's like ridiculous. But getting some good B sources, your B12s, your B complex, there's, making sure that's one of them, whether that be through, again, you could do a B12 shot, or you could do a B complex, or you could do a homocysteine support or something like that. I'm a big fan of doing, making sure that we get, getting your zinc, getting in vitamin C. I'm a big fan of, what are some other things that I like to take? Obviously we talked about vitamin D. I like doing the fish oils, but we're not getting a lot of, I think what's going on right now is we don't want to over supplement our nutrition, but we want to make sure that when we're looking at the big picture, where do we see we fall short? Most people are falling short with their vegetables than they are their proteins.
That's my last choice, unless I'm like, man, I'm still hungry. What can I add in? But but I still try to supplement. I do some phytonutrient greens,
right?
Because I know I don't eat.
Right.
So once again, look at your plan, look what you like, and then where are you falling short on the main things you need to function? Like you said, are you getting enough B vitamins that help convert food into usable energy? Are you supplementing enough D? And even then it's like, a lot of people could even supplement D and just maybe, I feel like the world's guts are messed up, which I know That's Francesca's
My
jam, by the way.
jam.
That is her jam. She's all about gut health, but really like should be.
Yeah.
That's our second brain, and a lot of issues stem from the gut and create a lot of problems. And we're going to do a whole episode talking about just inflammation, gut, just how to support your overall just digestive process and just make sure you're able to use what you're consuming. But going back to some of the vitamins, I kind of look at it as like vitamin B. Magnesium's a great one.
Yep,
Most of us don't have, whether you do it at night, it could help sleep. It could help you poop. There's different forms. I think a lot of people get confused once again, and this is the goal, is to take away some of the confusion. Should I do magnesium oxide? Should I do glycinate? Should I do threonate? There's different forms that have a little bit more help in certain areas, but get some magnesium.
Absolutely. And then look, I think a lot of people also fall short on their polyphenols and the antioxidant rich foods, which are again, vegetables and fruits. Yep. I think we are definitely, who doesn't love a great mango or a pineapple or something like that? But I think I call it the super sexy fruit because it's got everything you need and it's low glycemic and it's high fiber and it goes with every shake. It goes with every yogurt is your berries.
Yep.
That's a big one. And there are some good, in addition to the super greens, there's some good super reds, they call them. There's some really good, things that you can do to put that in as well. If you find you're falling short, I'm not against drinking your vitamins. I actually think sometimes liquid vitamins are a little bit better than taking the capsules. And find like a good brand, do the research because there's a lot of fake stuff out there, but do some good research on some brands. I know one of them, like Vibrant Greens, is a good one. So I don't know if there's the AG1s everybody seems to love.
What's funny is like some of those products that come, they have really good marketing.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And there's other products out there that actually are better and cheaper.
I used to do Baleen. It tasted like grass, but it was good.
I mean, I use actually NutriCost. Honestly, it's probably the one I've used over the last couple of years. I've tried a bunch of them and just digest well. I'm actually want to redo, since I've been on that, I haven't done a SpectraCell test to just see the difference. But going back to fruits, because you kind of said this, and I feel like a lot of people either eat fruits or they don't eat fruits, and fruits are a little bit different because it's fructose, right? If you're picking a better fruit source, fruits actually, goes to the liver. Whereas a lot of times, other type of carbohydrates or simple sugars or processed sugars kind of circulate and get used by the cells of our system if they get used, right? So I think a lot of people tend to migrate because they might have glycogen, they might have carbohydrates, but if the liver is not kind of where it needs to be or the blood sugar gets a little low, they tend to crave more sugar. And it's like, put a little fruit in your diet, get some of the, the polyphenols and a lot of the antioxidants that come from them. They're very different, even though you could still look at them. And that's where I said, like, don't let calories be the end all, because you could get calories from better quality foods and sources, and you're not going to have the same outcome. So I just don't feel like you got to completely eradicate or eliminate. I was there was an article a long time ago, it was like called Fruit to Fat or whatever, and I think they just demonize, it's fructose, just like, and don't get me wrong, like fructose or high fructose corn syrup, they go to the liver. Once the liver's full, it spills over. You'd have to eat a lot of fruit to make that happen versus, unless you're drinking some crap juice that's mostly not even, like fructose.
Don't drink your juices in fruit. No, don't do that.
So, like learning to have some fruit in the diet, once again, try to get a well-rounded, protein, carb, fat, fruit, just the things that if you could get it from food, and this is you all day long, like get it from your food first, and wherever you're not getting it, where you're lacking, then you look to use it as a supplement.
And there's ways to sneak it in. Like people be like, one big thing that people will say all the time, and this may be a good part for the audience, is how do I fit all this in? There's really not a lot to fit in. It's really finding the foods that you like, writing it down, and then going, this may go with breakfast, this could go with lunch, this could go with dinner. And maybe you're one that's like, hey, I do a brunch lunch. Like I'm not necessarily a big breakfast girl just because of my work, because I'm up early. So I tend to like a brunch lunch. So what'll go with what? So and then you have that plan. So like this way you don't necessarily skimp. So berries go with yogurt, berries go with dessert. So if you have that craving at night and you're like, I just don't know, like I just want something sweet. My go-to is like, get a bowl of a cup of berries is like almost 9 grams of fiber. And I think there's like less than 100 calories, if that. But you're getting all of the antioxidants with it. And if you want to pair it with something, maybe you pair it with a little cinnamon for blood pressure, or you pair it with a little cacao powder for a little extra antioxidant and maybe like a little iron or something like that. Or you put a dollop of yogurt if you want to go full fat or you want to go plant-based, whatever your jam is. That's the beauty of nutrition. There's no one way, there's your way.
Yep.
And obviously your way doesn't mean we're going to go and get the croissant. It's what's your way that's healthy and practical and will lead you to the goal, which is ultimately health, longevity, weight loss, muscle. We've named it all. So there's ways to put it in, but if you can't, like, again, you got to know you could put it into the other stuff.
I think too, if people would kind of start honing in on better sources, I promise you, you will feel better.
Oh, 100%.
You will function better and you will see it. It's one of those things that, a lot of people do certain things and they don't see the outcome right away. Like within a few days, you're going to feel completely different. Just trying to start with whole food and really have a good source of all macronutrients and support your system. And you could gain weight, you could lose weight, you could do it all. You could do it all with it in there. It's for sure. I think I used to be a lot more rigid in my younger years and just think like you have to do it this way because that's going to get you there the fastest. But then you end up neglecting stuff and you might not pay right away, but you tend to see some issues come up without, kind of really having a whole well-rounded plan.
Well, when you're doing it fast, there's the reason why the tortoise beat the hare, right? So when we're doing it fast, we may get there for a few weeks, but then ultimately you can't stay on that path. So you're going to want to jump off. And when you do jump off, why do we have to jump off where we're gaining the weight maybe we lose back, or we're maybe not seeing the muscle that we once saw before, or maybe the energy is starting to drop because we didn't find the balance. Nutrition is a balance. That is why the company is called Balanced Nutrition with Y. But it really is. It's a balance. So to your point, it's like, there's got to be that balance to what it's going to. If you're going all in, to what you said, once you pull it back, it's going to come back. So take it slow. The results are going to happen. Yep. We didn't get to be a certain way because we were like, oh, we're going to be this way today. And we evolve. We evolve every 5 to 10 years during our age groups. Like, how I worked out in my 20s as an endurance athlete is not the same as I'm working out as a 45-year-old woman during hormones. Like I'm doing less endurance. Yep. And I'm doing more strength and resistance. So, but I need to factor in my food for that. So it's just take one step at a time and try not to read too much because everybody has their thing. And what works for one won't work for another. So get on some good sources of research to read or hire somebody that can do that for you.
Yeah, I think, don't go all in. Usually the people that go complete 360 overnight are the ones that typically don't sustain it long term. No. It's like I always say, kind of put yourself in the pot of water, cinch it up a little bit, tighten it up, try to find what you like to do, and you get a little bit better each day.
Yeah. And find a team. I know that like when you've got one person that eats one way and one person that eats another way, not gonna lie, it's really hard. So if you have a spouse, if you have a boyfriend, girlfriend, family members that are all kind of in it, it's so much easier to do it together. I love coaching families. I love working with my own family, and my loved ones on this to like kind of teach them like it's that simple.
Yep.
So it's easy when you're not doing it alone, for sure.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people tend to overcomplicate it. And, it's definitely, if it's not your spouse, then make sure you get a girlfriend or a buddy or someone else to kind of help each other stay accountable. Somebody. I suck at cooking, so my stuff's pretty bland. But
gosh. So
what else do you want to cover in this episode? We already went over the basics of calories, macronutrients, micronutrients.
I feel we nailed it all we got enough sources for today. I think let's let the audience maybe sit with this. If they have questions, they could, filter in some questions. after the podcast is done, and then we can kind of build that into more podcasts and really dial in.
When I was gonna say, we welcome too, if you guys think of something that maybe you haven't heard, or a topic that hasn't been covered, like I said, shoot us a message. We do have some different episodes that we already plan to talk about that are super important, super helpful to just make this whole journey easier for you.
Yes, absolutely.
We welcome the comments to kind of, hopefully we could just be a wealth of knowledge and a resource just to help you be your best.
Absolutely. So hopefully you guys all got some great Nutrition 101 information today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next podcast. So I'm Francesca Scerbo here with Jeffrey Delaney, and we will see you for episode 2. Bye.